Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Tuesdays. How's it going, everyone? Nice to see you. All some familiar names and faces there. We've got William C. Beckham in the house. Hey, mate. How's it going? And Tiny Bites. Hello, hello. Sam's here. Awesome. Very cool. Who else is there? If there's anyone here that isn't that's new that I haven't met before, say hello in the chat, and I can give you a shout out and say hello back. It's your birthday. Hey, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Very many happy returns to you today. Tochijan. Please let me know how to say your name correctly, but welcome, regardless of my bad pronunciation. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us today for our stream. Yes. How many, dare I ask you how old you are? I mean, you wouldn't ask me because that would be rude, of course, but maybe, maybe you can tell us. Mario is in the house. Hello, Mario. And we've got Yush. Nice one. Who else is here? Lisa from Norway. Hello, Lisa. Welcome. How's it going over in the Facebook? Nice stuff, everyone. Very cool. Okay, well, I'm really happy to see all of the old peeps in the house and very excited to welcome new people to the stream tonight, and hoping it's going to be a fun one, as always, getting geeky about mixing and talking all things sound and audio processing. Now, I have a confession to make. Until 2 minutes ago, I forgot what I said that I'd do last time, because it was 2 weeks ago and life is busy. But what I said that I was going to do was to continue with the Faithful track and do a vocal session. But I forgot that. I'm really sorry. I've organised something else, but we will get back to that. So my apologies. We'll do the vocal mixing session in a couple of weeks. I will not forget it. And, you know, it's a recurring theme. It's a topic that everyone's really interested in. So it's really great that we have those stems, and we'll have a really great session for the vocal stuff in a couple of weeks. But what we're going to do today, yes, Ida, both of us forgot, didn't we? It's all good. We've got lots to talk about. So what we're going to do today is I took a cue from someone, and maybe it was you, William V. Beckham, that... Yes, someone said anyway a couple of weeks ago, wouldn't it be interesting if Jane did like a deep dive into like compression and all the analog, the history of compressors and the different types, and kind of went into it in a deep way. So of not just compression, but maybe EQ and saturation and tape and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what I'm going to do today. Well, not kind of. That's what I'm doing today. It's what I've focused on. What I've decided to focus on, and we're going to start off with a focus on compression. And we're going to get into the different types, and I'm going to also do a mix whilst we talk about it, but the focus is going to be on compression. So I hope that's interesting for you. Let me know if that's something that you're interested in. I mean, if not, we can improvise. Tell me what you're interested in. But okay, so we've got some interesting questions coming in already. So maybe if anyone has, maybe throw to me whilst we're getting started, what kinds of questions do you want asked to, what kind of questions do you want to know? What questions do you have about compression? Okay, what do you want to know about compression? So Bishop loves it when I talk compression. Nice. Happy about that. Adam has said, I'm so happy I clicked on this. I'm getting my popcorn ready. Yes, do it. Is it süß or salzig? Sweet or salty? Or a mixture? Okay, but Adam, whilst you're getting your popcorn ready, I am going to answer your question, which was, where is it? Does a good mix master depend on the arrangement? Now, that's a brilliant question, and I'd be interested for everyone to weigh in on that. What do you reckon? As you weigh in, because of the lovely delay, I can give you my answer. It absolutely is. The arrangement is part of it. It's very, very important. So as a mix engineer, we also get access and insights into maybe problems with the arrangement as we're mixing. So, one of the byproducts of getting better at mixing is that you get better at arranging, because you're at, when you're at the mixing end, you kind of go, oh, this is really messy, or I've got too much stuff in the low end. The low end sounds are competing for attention. Or another thing, why are the guitars at the same frequency as the vocals? Why are the guitars playing over the vocals? All of that kind of stuff. So absolutely, arrangement is a really big part of it. Now, does a good mix or master depend on arrangement? I think that there's a lot that we can do in the mix and in the master to really make a song work. But of course, the better we get every step of the way in the song production process, the better the song's going to be, right? So the better the melody, the better the lyrics, the better the arrangement, the more interesting the harmonies, the interesting, progression through the song. All of those things all add up to, a better song at the end, right? Dean is saying, record like you don't need to mix. I like it. Absolutely. So obviously, as we go, the idea is you get it, each stage you want to get it the best as you can before you go on to the next stage. But quite often, as it's art and it's imperfect, we often find as we go there are things that we could have done better, but you're already down the path, so you want to finish it. Because if you don't keep on going, you never finish anything. That's another problem, right? Okay, so Dean's saying, mix like you don't need to master. I love it. Yes, really, really cool. Okay, so someone's got a new compressor pedal. Yourself on Drugs says that. Nice one. Roshan is saying, how important is multiband compression in a mix? That's a really cool question. And if anyone knows me, I don't know how well you'll know me, but I would say that multiband compression is of zero importance in a mix. It's more of a mastering tool, and that's not to say you can't use it in a mix, but multiband compression, the times when you're going to use it, particularly for me when I'm talking to people that are learning how to mix, I think don't go to multiband compression until you really are killing it with compression and EQ. Like, get that right first, because multiband compression is a combination of the two and is more complex. So people that use multiband compression all the time and kind of don't know what they're doing with it tend to ruin the track, is what I hear. So, I mean, you can obviously do what you want, but my advice is that it's not important in a mix, but it can be very, very useful in different situations, right? Cool. Maximum crest factor for different instruments. I'm not going to answer that, because that's more of a kind of a mastering type. From my perspective, more something about mastering. Maximum crest, I don't care about that really. We're thinking about the energy and the movement of the sounds independently and then in relation to each other. So the crest factor, that just is to me about limiting the dynamics. Yeah, so we'll see. Watching smashing like that like button. Oh, sorry. Yes, hit the like button. Thank you, Adam, for that reminder. Reminder to everyone: if you like this, please hit like and subscribe. Subscribe to ADSR. We come in every week with these, every fortnight sometimes. Hit the like button as well. Yeah. Give it a thumbs up. All that kind of jazz. Whilst we're on the topic of it, I should also just remind anyone who just happens to find the stream and doesn't know what ADSR is all about. ADSR is an amazing platform for plugins and tutorials and sound packs and amazing community on Discord. So check it out if you haven't already. Okay, so we've got really great questions coming through. How to get a massive kick. Nice. Limiters on instrument buses. Oof, I'm not a fan of limiters in mixing ever, unless there's obviously certain situations when I'm going to use it, but not that often. But anyway, okay, really cool questions coming through. Cool, you're knowing ADSR. Good stuff. Okay, all right. So let's do it. We're doing mixing. Let's move across and see what we've got here. Okay, so I've just got, this is just an old track actually of mine that never made it out. So now I use it for my kind of mixing vids and stuff like that. It's kind of like a soul type track. Let me play a little bit and we'll check some levels and see how things are going. So please let me know the relative level of my voice and the song. Okay, let's check it out. Oh, hang on. I'll take these off so we can hear the whole song. Levels, let me know. Can I speak over it or is it too loud? Okay. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so that's the track. Adam says the levels are good. Too loud a bit. Levels are good. Well, okay. I'll try. I won't talk too much over when the music is playing. Okay, so that's the track. You hear what's going on. Now it's unmixed. You can see I've done well. That's a lie. I've started doing a little bit of mixing. So I want to take you through the beginning parts of it. This is actually not the full song. It's just a little bit because I'm working on it with, yeah, I only need a section basically because I don't have time to do the whole thing. So, okay, so what I've done to start off with, just to be clear for everyone that wants to kind of see the full mix procedure, is that I always go through and gain stage, and you can see here there's a trim plugin and I've gain staged various tracks that I felt needed it. So some are more than others. That's 4.5 dB. I know that the shakers, for example, came down a lot. And where is it? Okay, so this came down 10 dB. Okay, so I went through and gain staged it. And what levels am I looking for in a gain stage? Now I use a VU meter, and I'm looking basically, I kind of like to work to minus 16 dB FS RMS, and I set my VU meter so that the 0 point correlates to that, and that this is average loudness, not peak loudness. So when I'm mixing, I don't care so much about peak loudness, because if I get my average loudness right and the way that I'm working with my compressors and stuff like that, which we'll talk about today, I don't really need to worry about it. As an aside, my mastering engineer or anyone who is going to deliver a mix, you generally want the headroom in terms of the peak level to be between -3 and -6 dB FS peak, okay? So, but that just happens automatically really for me, so I don't worry about it too much. Okay, so for this, I want it to be hitting there. Where are we at? Beautiful. Okay, so I've set that well and it's sitting there. Now, if it goes over a bit, it's okay. If it goes under a bit, it's okay, because I haven't mixed it yet. So at the point when everything's in, it will be working towards that 0 point, and it shouldn't be kind of blowing out. So the VU meter is really good in the gain stage, I find, because it also tells me when there are problems. So let's play this again and see if we can see or hear where there are, probably see when there are issues. So let's play it again. when we go into the chorus, you can see that now I was just turning things off because I realized that I actually had a lot of compressors on already, the ones that I'm going to go through. So in the verse, it's fine, it's pretty quiet, but then when we get into the chorus, it's over because a lot of other instruments are coming in. So that's a note to me when I'm doing the gain stage that says to me, okay, I'm going to need to pay attention to the chorus to make sure that everything's working. There's obviously a lot of, there's some frequency masking going on there because it doesn't seem that much louder. Yoshi's asking why a VU meter and not a Lux meter, and that's a really good question. And the answer is I like VU meters. It's just really as simple as that. I can use a Lux meter if I want, but the VU meter to me feels, I respond emotionally to it more. I like the way it looks. It makes me feel good when it hits the zero. I like the way it moves. It's literally just, it's an aesthetic thing. And, you know, like how you feel when you mix, I think is important. So I like things that help me feel good and that are easy for me to understand and to get information out of it. I don't get as much information about a number in a Lux meter than I do when I see when frequencies come in that it pushes into the red and I see how it moves with the VU. So I get a lot of information from the VU that's more than just a number. It's kind of a feeling. So that's why I use a VU meter. You, of course, can totally use Lux meters. Okay, so that's, this is just kind of setting up the initial balances and kind of talking a little bit about how I like to use the VU meter there. Now let's go through just to give you a little bit of context about what else I've done. You're just saying, is it because of my analog background? Yeah, probably is. It's that, as well as the fact, as I said, it gives me a lot of information beyond just numbers. So, but probably I'm an old school girl. Okay, so just to give you a little bit more information, I've done some really subtle stuff on the drums because they're live drums. So I've gated the kick and the snare and the toms. So let's just hear that by itself so you can hear what I've done. Hang on, I'll turn that up for a sec. Okay, so we turn the gate off. Turn the gate on. Okay, now as I'm listening to that, I could probably be a bit more thingy about it. But basically, I just wanted to tighten up the kick. And I've also created with it, I'm using, so this is a gate, right? But when you bring it into the range so that it doesn't completely cut out the sound, it's called an expander. And this is really visually well represented visually here in Pro Tools. When you turn up the range, can you see how this little line comes in here? It's showing you that it's letting some of the signal still come through, but it reduces the volume significantly. So why would I use an expander instead of a gate? Well, maybe it sounds too harsh, it's too choppy, and you don't like it, but you do want the level to be lower so that the kick drum comes through more. That's why you use the gate. Whoops. Okay, so let me explain that. Let me demonstrate that sonically. Okay, so this is a gate. Are you listening really carefully? If you can listen, you can hear that some of it comes through, so it just feels more natural. Okay, so that is called a downward expander. All right, so that's one thing that I did. Another thing is, so I did that on both the drums, and then I also did some EQ. So let's have a listen to the kick without EQ. This is the out one. I want that to be more beefy. So I EQ'd it. Now, someone was asking about how to make your kicks massive. Now, we're going to focus on compression very soon, but one thing that's really important if you want to make something massive is to EQ it effectively. To focus on the aspects of the sound where is the massiveness that is inherent in that sound. So find out where it is and make sure that that's coming through. Maybe even enhance it some more if you want to. The second part of it is to make sure that no other sounds are competing with that sound in that frequency range. So for example, if I want this to be massive at 50 hertz, then I want to push this and I want to make sure that it's not big in the other channel, right? So over here, I've cut out up to 100 and something, 103, okay? So make sure that this is one of the things about if you want to make something big, you need to make sure that you make room for it to be big. Otherwise, you're going to have some problems. So these two together with some EQ and some gating. And now bring in the sub, which is the electronic drum. Okay, so now that's the drum sound without any compression or anything. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about was the famous 1176 compressor. Who knows about this and has used it before? Now also I'm going to be using UAD plugins today exclusively. They're amazing. I love them. However, might I also say that there are lots of emulations of analog gear out here, and these are not the only ones to use, although I obviously recommend them. They're used by all of the greats in the world and used by little old me. So now Adam is saying, are you not using sidechain on the kick? Absolutely not. I'm not one that's really interested in over sidechaining stuff. I don't think you need to. So like there's definitely times and place where you can sidechain, but I've got to say that I think people are really way too focused on things like multiband compression and sidechaining before they actually really understand how to use compression properly and really understand how to make something sound amazing with just EQ. So I would really encourage you to focus on the basics, really get that stuff right. Then when you decide to sidechain your kick or use multiband compression, you take your mix from here to there, not use sidechain compression on a mix that's here and just take it maybe up there just a little bit. So that's my hot tip. It's not very fun, but it's honest, and I really think, I don't personally use sidechain on kicks and stuff like that. Just give it space. Use EQ, clean it out. Okay. Right. So who knows about the 1176? Anyone know any information about it? Throw it out to me. So the 1176 is a compressor that actually, do you know what? No. Okay. I was going to do them in order of age, but I won't. I'm going to start here. So the 1176 came around in the 60s, and in the 60s was a time when, the Black Rooster does 1176. Yep. There's many emulations out there. So she's saying slow attack. Good guess, but in actual fact, one of the main characteristics of the 1176 is that it's super fast and responsive. And that was the goal of, is it Bill Putnam from Universal Audio, actually. They created these in the 60s, was to make a compressor that's really responsive and really fast. Yep, okay. So awesome. Okay, so different people have been using FET. Who knows what FET stands for? Cool. Okay, so one of the things about, now if you're thinking about when would I use this, that's the most interesting aspect to it, is that, okay, well, cool, it's made in the 60s and yada yada, but what do I care about that? So the thing that's really interesting about these is to think about the different applications. And one thing that I must say is that there's multiple versions of these, right? So they're not all, it's not all FETs are the same, and in which case not all 1176s are the same. There's multiple versions of them. So here's two different versions, and guess what? They have different characteristics. So depending on the emulation that you might use, or if you're lucky enough to use a real one, they're going to sound different. Okay, so this one is kind of a bit more smoother, and this one is really gritty and gutsy and has more kind of like balls, I guess. I mean, I don't know if that's very PC to say, but yeah. Okay, so so an FET, field effect transistor, is what it means, and it's a solid state, so it's not tube. and it's not optical, right? So that's an important thing to understand. And it's characterized by being kind of gritty, fast, responsive. And so then once we know all that information, we can then go, okay, how might I use this? So you can see that I've decided to use it on drums, and it's really good on drums because it's really responsive, and drums are dynamic and they have the power and the impact. So when we're working with sounds that we want to maintain the movement and the impact, a fast compressor is a good option. Okay, so percussive sounds for one, and then also not just drums, right? So someone said before, I can't remember who it was, I missed it there, but I think it was Adam, said it's really good with bass. So yeah, it's really good, can be really good for bass, but not just any old bass that is fast and picky and has movement to it, right? And that's an important part of the character. So rather than thinking that compression is good for a guitar or compression's good for, this is good for vocals and that's good for that, that's not the right way to think about it, because all compressors can be used on any instrument. The thing that we want to start to think about is what's the characteristic of the sound. So is it fast or slow? Is it active? Do we want it to be smooth and luscious, or do we want it to have spikes and be moving and be active? Right? So that will help us decide what kind of compressor we want to use. So this one's for movement, for attitude, for energy, for grit, FET, and the 1176 is what you want. Okay, so let's now put it on. Now someone says, what about a LA2A on a kick? And I've got to say, I would say no to that. No. And I'm going to explain more about, look, as soon as I say no, there's always an example, because it's art and it's creativity and you can do what you want. But I want to talk a little bit more about why I'm going to say, generally speaking, no to LA2A on a kick. Okay. Whew, I need to have a drink. I'm talking too much. Okay, so let's now set this up. Okay, I'm going to turn it on. Now, how do we set this? Now, this is characterized by we turn up the input, and that drives, now this has a set or a static threshold. So you increase the level until it hits the threshold point, and then compression starts to occur. Okay, so if we take this right down, you see no compression happening, and we turn it up. There's no threshold. We increase the gain until it crosses the threshold, and then it starts to compress. Cool. Okay. Now the next thing is the attack and release. Now, one of the things that everyone needs to know that often people don't know is that the attack, it's around the other way. So if you want a fast attack, you want it to be there at number 7 to the right. Okay. If you want a slow attack, you go to number 1. So that's the first thing people get really confused about. The same thing with release. Fast release is here on number 7, and slow release is on number 1. So with a kick drum, what we often want to do is we want to have a slow to medium attack, because the idea is that we want to let the transient part go through, and we want to compress the resonant sound to help control that and give the kick the more oomph and more body. And then we want the release to move in a way that is that relates to the natural movement of the song or the groove, right? So you set the release based on the tempo, but not really the tempo, more about moving based on the energy of the groove, let's say. Okay, so let's check it out. Let me go really fast. So the more that I make it slower, we get the transient comes through, and the transient isn't overly controlled, and then we have a little bit more of the kind of subby information gets controlled and pushed through. Okay, now let's think about this release. I'm going to make the release really slow, and then let's go the other way. Okay, let's bring it down. Okay, can you hear that when I brought that back and made it slow, that then the kick got more active and more punchy, okay? So we want more energy to it, right? And so one of the things is that we want to do is to think about the energy that you want to translate. If now this is one of those things is like someone said, so kicks are not fast attack. Now I'm going to say, like, generally speaking, no. Now there is always a point when this is the thing is that not every kick is made equal and not every song is made equal. So there are some times when you might need to have a fast attack because the kick is too transient maybe, and you want to control the transient. Okay, so if you think about the envelope of a kick drum or whatever of a sound that you have, you've got to think about the stages of that sound. So if you're going to have the compressor working on the very beginning, that's going to control the transient, which is the click. Okay, so someone was saying they weren't really good about hearing transients. So it's everything that's the clickiness that's in the beta of the kick drum. Kick drums are really, really good for learning about compression because it has a really clear, like, 3 stages of its sound profile. So it has the transient, which is the beta click. Then it has the resonance of the boom in the body of the instrument and then of the drum. And then it has the release, which is the sound of the drum in the room, I guess, generally. Okay. So this is really good to practice compression because you can identify the different stages and you can try and listen in on them as you mess around with the compressor. So I encourage you to do that some more. Okay, so the faster that I made that release, the more energetic and percussive the kick is. Now, then I need to go back to the song and be like, okay, cool. Do I want it to be this movie and this kind of jumpy for this song? And I think the answer is no, so I'm going to bring it back slightly. Cool. Okay. And another little tip, I can't remember where I read this, but some people say that with the kick, with the release, you want the needle to go back to the 0 point before it starts again with the kick, so that you can see that that's what's happening here. Pretty much, almost. Okay. Okay, so let's say someone said, well, compressing kicks, what's your main aim and purpose? So that's, again, that's a really good question. And the answer is, it's a big answer. So it depends on the sound. It also depends on the relationship of the sound in the context of the song. It depends on, because compression isn't just about, it's not just a static thing where you just control one kick and turn it down. We're thinking about the envelope in time, and we're also thinking about the part playing through time. Okay, so with analog, and also, is it a sample or is it an analog kick? So there's lots of things that you need to be thinking about. That's one of my main questions that I ask myself. What is my aim and my purpose? What am I trying to do with this compressor? So that's a great question for you to have. And only you can answer it. I can't answer that for you. That's one of the things that we do when we mix, is ask ourselves these exact questions. Okay, so in the context of this particular kick, I can answer what I'm trying to do here. So what I'm trying to do is, number one, I want to make the overall sound of the kick feel a little bit more kind of contained, I guess compressed, but kind of contained and more compact, and with bringing a little bit more slap on the transient, a bit more power, and a little bit more fullness in the body of the kick. The second thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that it's like the energy and the movement of the kick is working in the way that I want it to, which is why I'm focusing on the release. Then the third thing I want it to do is, because this is a live kick drum, I want to make sure that when I'm compressing it, I've kind of balanced the energy of the kicks over time, because they're all different hits by a human person, so the level changes. And the fourth thing that I'm trying to do here when I'm kicking is when I'm compressing, is give the kick a bit of grunt, a bit of attitude, and that's why I chose this particular compressor. Okay, so someone is saying, can we hear it without? And you certainly can. Okay, hang on, I need to regain stage it as well, just one sec. That's the final part, is to gain stage. Okay, so here you can hear that I've successfully done the job that I set out to do. And another important thing, the final thing to say, is that the relative level, you will get a perceptively louder kick drum for less level. That's the other big thing about compression, is that you can maximize the voltage that you have, or the audio energy that you have, minimize the voltage that you're using and have more impact of the sound perceptively, of the perceived loudness. So that's the other thing we want to do. Okay. Now, just for fun, if I copy these settings, hang on a sec. Oop. Okay, where is that? Okay, here it is. Okay, so if I copy these settings exactly, all right. Well, pretty exactly. Let's see if they are comparative. No, not at all. Wow, okay. Okay, so this is an important thing to see, that each of the different versions of these, they're different because they were made differently. They're made in different periods. Okay, so this one came out, it has less, you need to drive this harder to get to the threshold point. Okay, and then a faster attack. Okay, so it's a really different game, that it's not kind of set it and see. Now, I really want to bring this forward because I think it's important to, like, presets or kind of like turn the dial to here. It doesn't work. You've got to set the compressor manually based on what you're hearing. Obviously, there are presets in here that have been working, they've kind of been set. Let's try and let's just pick one random one. Wide open. Well, let's do pumping. Okay. Okay, and so that says pumping, but to me it's not pumping. It's like overly controlling it. So Okay, so I don't like the sound of the black one, but I like the sound of this blue stripe. Okay, so that's enough on those ones. Okay, so that's the 1176. It's FET, it's fast, it's reactive, it's fun. One other thing to show you, there is a trick that some of you may have heard of. It's called the all button in mode. And with this, you hit all the buttons. So I'm pressing all the buttons in by holding like shift and whatever. And then it does something weird. It's like a mistake that ended up being a really cool creative thing that people use. So it became a feature. So let's have a listen to it in all button in mode. Really kind of, if you want to have, it's a really fast release. It's kind of pumpy and it's a bit more gritty. There's a bit more, there's a full description on exactly what goes on. I can't recall, but it's kind of cool. Anyway, so that's the all button in mode, and that's the 1176. So great for fast, moving things. Okay, so Sam is saying, do you have to know when to drive a type of compression more, or can you test it out? Yeah, I mean, you definitely figure it out on the spot. Yeah. You use your ears always. But I think that there's a good thing that you said there, and I think that something which is really helpful for me at least is that the more I know about this gear, the more like guts I have when I'm using it, and the more power I have to understand the differences. And it helps me also to hear more, because compression it's subtle, right? And so knowing more about it helps you direct your hearing and the way you pay attention to things. So that's how I kind of use this knowledge. But always your ears, if you can hear the differences and you can judge it yourself, obviously you go for it. Okay, so that's 1176. Now let's move on to, I'm going to zoom all the way over to my mix bus, and I want now to move to talk about mix bus compression. So who uses mix bus compression? How do you work with it? What's the go? How do you set it? Does anyone know what kind of compressor is like favored for mix bus compression? I have a couple here that are set up. I'll give people. So Dean is saying glue. I like it. Very, very good. So glue is the effect of the compressor. What is the brand of compressor, or what is the style of compressor that traditionally and famously gives that glue feeling? Adam's saying fab filter. Now, fab filter compressor is actually a contemporary compressor that is digital and kind of does, or, you know, has the capacity to change the circuits, right? So what we're really talking about is the different types of compressor circuits and vibe of, you know, the way that is it fast or slow or whatever. Okay, so cool. There's some really good suggestions here. Dean is saying SSL. DJ Cody Reed says SSL 4000. Like it. Okay, so the SSL 4000, the analog console, was the first one to have the SSL VCA compressor, which is here, right? And this is a famous one that was put on the mixing desk at the output, and then, so, you know, to use the compressor on the mix bus. So that's what it was designed for. Now, this is a VCA compressor. What does anyone know what a VCA compressor is? What does it stand for, and what does it mean? Any ideas there? So this is also, as you're putting in your answers there, and the VCA compressor is a transistor-based compressor. So it's not, doesn't have any tubes. It's not optical, obviously. So it's transistors, so solid state, obviously solid state logic. It's makes sense, the company name. So VCA stands for the BX Townhouse. Sam, I don't know what the BX Townhouse is. I'll have to check it out. I haven't used it before, but very much might be. Isomatic says voltage controlled amplifier. Correct. Very good. Now, what does that mean? That's the next question that very few people actually know. Like, all right, I don't know what that is. So voltage controlled amplifier basically means, now I'm not going to get too techie with this, but because I don't even know that much of it myself, but basically it's a feedback design whereby the signal is split into two. One, the signal is kept, obviously, for the signal that we hear that wants to be compressed. And then the second part of the signal goes off, and then that is turned into control voltage controlled amplifier. And that control voltage determines the amount of compression that comes back in onto the signal. Whatever. If that's too confusing, you don't need to worry about it too much. It's just a fun fact. So that's the name of voltage controlled amplifier. But actually it's voltage controlled attenuator is probably the better, more geeky, more correct terminology. Now, Yush is saying, is this similar to the Ableton Glue compressor? And yes, 100%. So the Ableton Glue compressor is based off this. And you'll notice that the Ableton compressor has this very familiar same kind of setup here, okay? That's because it's a copy of, it's an emulation of the VCA like this. Getting a little techie now, totally. I promise we won't go too much further. It's just fun, and it's interesting to kind of think about these differences, because particularly in the digital world, you know, it's hard to make things, you know, to embody them and to really get inside them. And as a mix engineer, I think all of these bits of information help me have fun with sound and help me explore and really get into the different plugins in a much more a deeper level, and it helps me make better music as a result. So that's the point of today. Okay. Whew. All right. So we've got our VCA compressor. Now this is a really famous one. I read an interesting statistic that in 1996, right, this is going back maybe before some of you were born, 1996, well, hang on, I wrote it down because I was just like, wow. 83% of all #1 singles in 1996 were recorded on an SSL desk, and thus used SSL, this compressor, on the mix bus. Isn't it an amazing statistic? Anyway, so if you want a 90s sound, you know what to do. You need to use SSLs. All right, so how to set it up is the next thing. So now we've all said, a few of you said correctly, glue. So when we're going for a mix bus compressor, now I've got this on my mix bus. that terminology is confusing sometimes, but it just means main output, or, you know, depending on how you set it up. This is the final channel where all of this, it's a summing of my mix and where I'm going to do my final processing. So if you have this on your master output, it's the same thing. Okay, so a bus compressor wants to be like glue, right? That's the point of it. This is not a sponsored session, but yes, I am definitely quite passionate about analog and analog emulations. Anyway, okay, so where are we? So how to set them. Now, the opposite, now if you notice with my, when I was working with the 1176 on the kick drum, that was a lot. I had a lot of compression. I had a lot of gain reduction, like maybe 8 dB or something like that. When I'm coming to the mix bus and when I'm on the other end of the mix, so I'm thinking about the mix as a whole, I'm likely to be much more gentle with compression. That's because the compression is being applied to every single sound, and the more that I'm heavy-handed on it, I can really, you know, like squash and ruin the mix pretty quickly. So someone is saying, what's the difference between an SS? That's Dewey, is it? What is the difference between SSL and a regular compressor? Now, let me just clarify something here. SSL is a brand of audio equipment. They make mixing desks, they make EQs, they make compressors, they make a bunch of different things. So the difference between an SSL and a regular compressor, it's just a brand. So the Ssl compressor, this one that we're talking about, this is a Vca compressor. Now, I'm not just going to talk about SSL. I'm going to also talk about another brand in a second. This brand, which is Manly Very Moo. So a Very Moo compressor is like a Vca type. It's a kind of, well, actually it's not really truly a Vca because it has tubes, but it's often used in a similar kind of way. But anyway, we'll get to that. Oh, hang on, what's another Vca? Who wants to tell me another Vca compressor? Maybe the Dangerous compressor? Let me know if you know of other Vca compressors. Okay. Okay. So you're saying, I remember from an older video, compression multiplies. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so compression, Very Moo cow presser. Yes, that's the one. So compression multiplies, exactly, okay? So the more times we have compression, the more it's going to add up and it's going to be intense. So do be aware of that, obviously. So let's set this bad boy. Turn it on. Okay. Now I'm going to turn the whole of the mix on now because we're doing... Okay, so now how to set it. Now there's, again, obviously you can do what you want, but the guideline, and this is how I approach my compression, is first of all, I decide whether or not I want to have a high pass filter. And this is something that's become very popular more recently because we have more bass in our music. And bass takes up a lot of sound energy. And so if you have lots of loud bass coming through, the bass is going to make the compressor work a lot harder because it's a lot louder, and compressors respond to voltage or amplitude or loudness. So if we don't want the low frequencies to be compressed, we use a filter to let it go through, and then the compressor works on all of the sounds above that, okay? Cool, so I set mine to like 87, so it's only just letting the very low stuff go through, and then we have, the rest of it's being compressed. And then I'm going to set my threshold. Now the question often is, how much compression do I want? Now for me, when I'm on my mix bus, I don't like to go over 4 dB. In actual fact, I always try and set it to like 2 or 3. So it's kind of the needle in the middle of that point there, okay? And then in terms of attack and release, does anyone have any ideas about attack and release settings for the mix bus compressor? How would you do it? And just whilst you're answering that, Roshan is saying, is it okay to use a DPR 402 for bus compression? I don't actually know what DPR 402 is. Yes, I'm going to say probably. So isomatic is in straight away with slow attack and fast release. Yes, you get the star. Nice one. Okay, so I mean, it's also, I have it set up there, but I'm sure Isomatic is a mixing genius and knew the answer themselves anyway. So yeah, so I have it on. Now for this one, you set, in terms of how slow, again, what's the song, what's the tempo, what's the groove? You want to set it based on what's going on in the track. So I read something really cool today when I was doing a bit of preparation for this. Okay, and so I've got to find the quote, but someone said, this is great. So this is a tip. It says, if your mix is dull, slow down the attack. Okay, so if you've got your attack too fast, right, so this way, that means it's clamping on the transients, and the transients is the way that we perceive the rhythmic changes and the variance in the sounds and the movement and the dynamics and the rhythm and stuff. If you're too controlled of those, the overall of your mix will lack energy and will start to sound dull. So if that's the case, bring back the attack. If your mix is dragging, then that means that the release is too slow and you're not getting the end of the sounds, not moving off quickly enough, so you're losing the rhythmic uptake, then quicken up the release. Okay, so mix is dull, slow down the attack. Mix is dragging, speed up the release. All right, so let's do that. Let's go for a fast attack and a slow release and see what it sounds like and try and make it sound better. Okay, attack first. You can hear the transients coming through more. Okay, and then I'm happy with it, all right? So I got it moving, kind of sitting in the place that I wanted. I had to adjust the threshold because it was still a bit too much for my taste. And then, yeah. Okay, Adam is asking about mix chain. I'll answer that in a second. Okay, so for now, that's kind of where we are with the VCA. Another option, now, again, so actually maybe this is, I'm kind of going to answer this, Adam. In terms of your mix chain, now I think there are so many videos and everyone's saying different things because mixing is an art form, right? And it's creative and it's expressive and there's many, many different ways to do it. The general, I would say that if you're confused and want some guidance, is that at a minimum, you put some compression on your mix bus is a very standard thing to do these days. So the question about which compressor should I use? If in doubt, in my opinion, use a glue compressor. Use the famous glue compressor, which is the Ssl, which is the one that I've explained to you. There's many emulations. Use the Ableton one, whatever. If you want to go a little bit further, you can start to think about the characteristics of the song and choose the compressor characteristic that match the energy of the song. So for an Ssl, this type of VCA is more in your face, more kind of reactive and gutsy and a bit more, it's going to control and be a little bit more robust. If you were to choose something like the Vca, this is a very high fidelity. I mean, they're all high fidelity, but the Vca is going to be more transparent. It's not going to be as changing and moving the, it's not necessarily going to kind of bring out the transient or bring out the release and the rhythmic aspects more, but it will kind of just glue everything and make it just sound better. You kind of go, I don't know what's going on, but it just sounds better. Okay, so that's the Manley. So let's have a comparison of the Manley now. I'll put this on. Take me, use my body melting, this one has me cry. Sweating, smoking, I got this high. I can't breathe in this new world order, so I'll take my time. Stay here just a while. Okay, so I'm switching between the two. So now I went from here. We're back on the Ssl. Take me. No, we're not. Now we're on it. Now that to me, I'm getting a little bit more of the push through of the kick drum. I mean, it's subtle, but I'm trying to find some things. Now let's go to the very move. This feels slightly less edgy to me. It's kind of, it's subtle. But so for this mix, I would always use the SSL, I use it all the time. But as I'm listening to this, for this mix, which is kind of a bit more smoother, I actually think in this case, I would go for the very moo. Okay, so that's one example of how to make the decision about what chain you want to use. Now, in terms of other things, we're not focusing on that today, Adam, but seeming you asked. If you want other things on the chain, a high quality EQ for tonal adjustments, I use a Manley Massive Passive. And for me, that's it. Sometimes I might have a little bit of saturation, but I use saturation on lots of other channels. So I tend to do all the saturation throughout the mix. Very rarely would I put saturation on the channel. That's it for me. Like, I don't really go too hardcore on the mix bus. I'm more of I don't do top down as much as I do the other stuff. Within, each track and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we've got 1176. We've looked at the VCA, and the third one that I want to look at today before we finish our stream, time flies when you're talking about compression, is of course the famous LA2A. Now, what is the, tell me about the LA2A. What do you know about it? Okay, so let's, whilst you're thinking about answering that question, Yoshi's saying, how do you train to hear compression? Honestly, so many times I struggle to hear a difference whilst working on a song. That is a very honest and really great comment. Thank you for making it. Really, there's a few things to say about this. Now, I'm going to go big. I'll go big while I explain this. Now, there's a few things to say. One thing is that I think there is an element of fake it till you make it when you first start mixing music, right? So it doesn't mean just put stuff randomly on or use presets and think that you're killing it. Fake it till you make it means do your research, learn about suggested settings, research and learn about these different compressors and understand what it is that you should be looking for. And if you don't fully understand it, if you set it based on what the kind of experts advise. And now, again, I said don't set presets. And when I say presets, I think it's important if you're going to use presets, this is for an educational purposes, right? If you know what you're doing and you want to use a preset because you're busy or what you want inspiration, knock yourself out. But when you're trying to really learn, presets don't help you necessarily. There is a way to engage with presets that will help you learn, right? So if you're going to use a preset, I would encourage you to set the preset, see what the settings are, maybe write them down, and then reset it yourself so that you're putting that into your muscle memory. That's something that you're setting that makes sense. If you don't do that, you won't engage with it and it doesn't have much meaning. If another thing is for you to think about what it is that they're trying to do. So if it says pumping, you can go, okay, what about this setting makes it pump? Etc. Right? Okay, so really engage with it and explore it. The thing is that the more that you mix and the more that you ask these questions of yourself when you're mixing, you start to be able to discern these subtle differences in the mix and in the different ways that you set the compressor and the different types of compressor circuits that you use and all that kind of stuff. So Yush, stick with it, my friend. It does come. It is frustrating, but fake it till you make it. Read lots, experiment, practice, and you'll get there. It kind of is like a bit magic. And one day you're just like, oh my God, I can hear that, right? So it will come. Persist. All right. Now back over to the LA2A. Okay. What have we got here? So no one's told me what the LA2A is, so I will talk to you about it. It's really, really interesting, this one. It's one of the oldest. It was in the 50s. I'm going to say 58 was the LA2, which was the first, the precursor. And who wants to tell me what the characteristics of LA2A is? Whilst I explain to you what the circuit is made of. Excuse me. So the compressor circuit, now this is an interesting one because some people say it's a tube amp, a tube compressor, and the tube compressor It is not a tube compressor. It has tubes in its circuitry, but the tubes that are in its circuitry are for coloration. So if anyone uses Fender amps, they have 12 AX7 tubes, and this has 12 AX7 tubes, and they do the similar thing that it does in a guitar amp, right? So the tube nature of it is just for color. Now the question about how does the compressor circuit work, like remember what I said with the VCA, that it's a voltage control, the signal splits and it becomes a control signal. Here, that I love it, it's so magic, it's a photo cell. Now I actually have a picture. I prepared some things earlier, if I can find it. Where is it? Let me see here. Sorry, everyone. I do want to show you these, though. Oh, maybe I got rid of it. Oh, no. Anyway, let me see. LA2A history. I think this one is the one that we want. Yeah, so it's an optical one. Now, here we go. This is now, again, really good information is to be found online, of course. You can read the manuals, right? This is a picture of the manual. Very cool. They're really interesting. And I wanted to talk about this today, but time goes pretty quickly. But there's so much interesting stuff in manuals. I am that geek. I do read manuals. I love it. You get lots of really cool information. Now, this is the photo cell, I believe. This is the optical attenuator. Now, what does that all mean? So basically, this is so magic because basically this compressor, it compresses through light. It's light. So there's basically, it's kind of hard to explain in so many words, but okay, so if you imagine a pipe and you imagine that there's a cap over the pipe and then the water can't get through. So that would be like limiting, okay? So nothing's getting through. Then if you poke holes in the cap, some water gets through. And the more holes there are, that means the less resistance there is, so the more of the water gets through. So if you think about that in terms of light, so the more that the light lights up, the more compression is happening and the more not as much is getting through. So I think I said that right, but go for it. Read more about it if you're interested. It's super interesting, I think. And it kind of helps me to think about how the signal works. I get excited about it, obviously, as you can hear. The other thing that's really interesting and important to know is that it has a two-stage or a two-stepped release characteristic. So that's the thing that's really important to understand about optical compressors is that the release has two stages. So it goes quite quickly in the first aspect of the release, and then the second aspect is much, much, much slower. Okay, so this is how you get the vocals where they still have an articulation, but they glue or they kind of like combine the phrases. If you want to have a really big ballad vocal, LA2A is a great one because it kind of seems to glue the phrases together and helps things seem more musical. So that's one of the aspects of the LA2A. Okay, so enough about the LA2A. Check it out. For now, today I decided to use the LA2A on the bass. That's another area where it works really, really well. Now for this bass, I could have used the 1176, but for this bass, I want it to be warmer, slower, creamy. So this is why I use this rather than gritty, aggressive, percussive, which is what the 1176 will give me. Okay, so let's now play with the bass. Now, there's not much going on here, is it? So basically, I can just peak reduction. I can see how much reduction I want and then regain it. That's it. There is also an emphasis button on some of these. And this will change. This is like a frequency. So it's what part of the frequency range is being allowed to get into the circuit. Cool. Okay, so basically what this is doing is just kind of controlling the bass, kind of bringing up a little bit more of the low resonances, just making it sound good, basically. So let's hear that now with the drums, perhaps. Hang on a sec. Drums. Oh no. Well, let's just hear it with everything.
Take me, use my body melting. That's what helps me cry. More sweat and smoking. I got desire.
Okay, so the idea, what am I trying to do here is that I want the bass to sit underneath, not to be lost out on certain notes and not to overblow on other notes. So that's why I've chosen this, and that's why this one's a good one for that job. Now I realize it's already 8:05. Time flies. Time flies when you're talking compression. Is this my voice, says you? If some parts of it are my voice and others are not. There's two people singing. All right. So that is a deeper look into compression. Now we only got to talk about 3 compressors, or 3 brands and 3 famous brands of compressors, really. 3 different circuits. So there's lots to explore. And the point of today was I really hope that you got some insights into how you can supercharge your knowledge in mixing. You can read manuals. Just because you don't have an LA2A, you've just got an emulation. Read the LA2A manual, and that helps you understand, because the emulation is based on that, right? All this information is really easily available online. And if you have, sometimes, particularly these days with the internet, there's so much information. It's just like, where do I start? Like, what do I do? So I hope that today is a stepping stone for you to empower yourselves on your exploration about things like compression, and pick up information. And again, in terms of new information, just bite it off just as much as you can handle. Learn that one bit and then come back for more. Okay, so don't try and take it all in one go, because you'll just go overwhelmed. All right. So I hope that you had a good sesh today. Getting deep into compression. It's definitely one of my favorite topics, and I hope that it wasn't too boring. Well, of course it wasn't boring. It was compression, and it's sound, and it's exciting, and it's music. Awesome. All right, everyone. Well, you are great. Awesome. I'm glad that you enjoyed this. I'm glad that you are able to, asking questions and then getting answered online. That's what it's all about. Cool. All right. So we are going to, next week we're doing, we're out of the mixing box, and I'm going to be doing programmed drums. I'm going to talk about, I think what I'm going to do is like how, and this is, I always encourage you, if you have knowledge around this, bring it into the discussion. But next week I'm going to be talking about using sampled drums and how to, like, sample drums from sound packs and stuff like that, how to create and to inject your own personality, your own style, and to make them kind of your own. On one level, and the other thing is to how to develop your drum programming so that the whole track develops and has punctuations and impact, rather than the drum loop just goes on throughout the song. Okay, so one part is sound design, the other part is like drum programming, arrangement, and stuff like that. And then we'll be back again for more mixing. And to Vca, who joined late, I saw their apologies, we're not doing a track this week, but we will get into it in a couple of weeks' time, and that will be vocal production focus. Sweet. All right, everyone, I am going to log off and chill out. Have a lovely Tuesday, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. Tschüss.